I had a conversation with a good friend of mine about basically this business endeavor that he had done, and over a long period of time, it ended up not working out. But in that whole period of time, he never reached out to me once. I was like, why? And what transpired from his reaction is kind of the point of this video. I'm gonna talk about that conversation, and I think it absolutely affects so many people and limits their capacity and why they aren't successful and some of the underlying reasons. And at the very end, I'll give you kind of a framework that has helped me through this year particularly, because it's been a very hard year for me, but hopefully it helps you. The big theme of this though is that no one cares, just win. Because until you win, effort always goes unnoticed. You just have to get used to it. It's the way of the world. I remember I asked him, I said, hey, do you mind if I make a piece of content about this? He was like, sure, but what about? You know, from our long conversation. I said, you said this thing, if I'm gonna fail, I'd rather it be on me. And he's like, well, what about that was interesting to you? He said, I honestly needed to have that happen to realize that I can't do it on my own. Otherwise, it'd be easy to put that blame on somebody else. And so I responded with, how could you put blame on someone else? And he said, well, you know, saying like, hey, I failed because I used someone else's system, or I failed because, you know, so-and-so didn't keep their end of the deal, or didn't do their responsibilities, or I failed because they ruined my business by doing X, Y, and Z. And they're all basically just like cop-outs when your mind gets kind of weak, right? They're kind of like excuses. But I hate to say that I've witnessed this happen too many times. And this is all him saying this. And I said, fault's funny because it just doesn't matter. No one thinks to themselves like, hey, that worked out really well for him. I wonder whose fault it is. We only think fault in the negative. We don't think fault in the positive, right? I bring this up to him and he says, I have a visceral understanding of the fact that I need better systems, you know, better leverage and better people around me to, you know, make that next chapter happen. And so I have to stop hiding. In thinking about this, I was like, no one asks whose fault it is when it works. And the reality is that 2 years from now, when you think about the championship Super Bowl game or the quarterbacks who've hit these records, no one's like, hey, you know, that guy got really good calls from the ref. Hey, that, you know, it was really raining that day. No one remembers. They just remember who won. And so I think that this is a really interesting thought line that I wanted to kind of dive into, because the individual in question did something in the fitness space. And so I reached out and was like, why didn't you ask me for help? And this was basically his response, was that he wanted the failure to be on his own if he was going to fail. And it was such in contrast to how I've seen the world that I thought it was worth making, because for any of you who have this worldview, I think it does you a tremendous disservice. Because my perspective has always been, it will always be my fault and no one will care what I got help or who I got help from. They will just know whether I won or lost, period. And so the reason that the background on my phone, like I'm so passionate about this, like the background on my phone is 2 words. It's just win. That's it. It's just win. When I think about that, it's like no one cares. Just no one cares. No one's going to ask, how many people did you get help with before you failed? They just are going to know whether you failed or not. And I think it's ridiculous to live life this way, because the real is that underneath of this is actually ego. It's not being able to say, I don't know, please help. And so it means that many people would rather maintain their egos and fail than win. And so I think a lot of beginners are stuck there. They're actually stuck in their own pride. They don't reach out for help. They don't consume content because they think they're smart enough. And this is something that's really common amongst people who identify as being intelligent. That's actually what's really interesting. This is why I think humility is such an important part of getting to where you want to go, is that you have to be able to say, I don't know. You have to be able to say, I failed, or I couldn't figure it out. And so if you can't do that, right, because you probably maintain some certain aura, some sort of image to the people around you of like, oh, he's a smart guy, or he was always good at school, or whatever the thing is, like, and then you see somebody else who was dumb at school all of a sudden succeed, it's because usually they're okay being like, I don't know, can somebody help me? But if you're the smart one of the people you know, then you're not willing to do that because you have to humble yourself. But the thing is that the work has to be done, the learning has to get learned. The question is, what format or what mental soup do I need to have in my head that maximizes the likelihood that I will learn faster than other people? And I think humility is one part of that soup. You have to be humble enough to listen, to ask. You can learn anything you want as long as you're willing to look dumb in front of other people for an extended period of time. I think the most underrated money-making habit is being willing to look stupid. Because one of the surest ways to never succeed in life is to avoid looking dumb, is to avoid failing. And what's really interesting about this is that risk is guaranteed. And so there's this thing that people have this misconception, this fallacy about how life works, which is they want to avoid risk. But the thing is that all great things come with risk. If you put an idea out there, you risk ridicule. If you want to fall in love, you risk rejection. Like if you want to have intimacy, right? You risk vulnerability. Like all of these things have wherever there is joy, there is suffering. And wherever there is suffering, there's potential for joy. And so the thing is that most of these elements that we want out of life are double-edged swords. They're two sides to the same coin. We want one side without the other. We want the sunny days without the rainy days, but it's just weather. And the only way you can avoid that is by never going outside. But I think if you never go outside, I think you miss out on life. And so I think to the same degree, like missing out on risk is that we have this big fear of this thing when the reality is that if you risk nothing, you become nothing. You are nothing because nothing ventured, nothing